welcome to the Ignite Community Podcast, where our goal is to equip, inform, and challenge. My name is Josh, and I am your host today, and I am joined today by two Jakes. I was told there could only be one Jake, but there's two. We have our, if you guys, and also Tyler, if you guys will just introduce yourselves really quickly.
Yeah, I am the first Jake, the real Jake, and fighting words. I have been serving as the youth pastor of Radiate Youth, a youth group at Ignite Church, for only about 4 months now. So credibility is, credibility is a big topic for me.
Well, I am Jake Moore, and I'm the executive pastor. So when we're talking about leadership, get to lead these guys and really talk about credibility. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, I'm the only Tyler, so that's easy for me. But I get to serve here as the Connections Pastor. I've been here about the same time Jake has, as about 4 months. I'm getting to serve in the capacity of Connections Pastor.
All right, so you guys already kind of teed it up. We're talking about leadership and specifically credibility. And I think we have really three unique perspectives. Obviously, part of Pastor Jake Moore's job at Ignite Church is leading us as pastors, and he also teaches leadership for our Equip Growth Track. So with that being said, we'll let it off with you, and if they want to chime in, because we first need to define our terms. So the first question I'll ask is, define credibility.
Well, in the sense of credibility and what we'll talk about with the bucket effect is something that it's really passionate for me, something that a previous pastor taught me, really about making sure that when we want to add value to people, we have to have our bucket full, and we add to our bucket by character, consistency, and competency. And when we do those things well, we're able to essentially turn a valve, add value to people, help people. But when we do those things poorly, we drain our bucket, and we're not able to really be able to help anybody, equip anybody, or lead anybody.
Yeah. Okay. So you're already talking about buckets. So we should go ahead. I would say, and I know you guys want to talk, but the idea of credibility bucket, even with credibility, I think even before you came on, I heard of relational equity, but then you brought the credibility bucket. It's one of the things you teach in Step 4 of the Growth Track that I think people really loved. I personally love. What is the credibility bucket?
Well, I pretty much just told you, but we'll dive in a little bit deeper. There's three things in leadership. Whenever you want to do anything, when you're making a big decision or you're making an investment in someone or some project, really you cannot do that unless you have high level of credibility. So people will trust you, they'll believe in you, they'll follow you. So that bucket is there, just hypothetically, so that we fill it with those three things I just mentioned: competency, character, and consistency. And then we're able to make decisions because the people around us, the people that we're leading, they now will look at you and say, okay, I believe in that person. So when you think about your bucket being full, it's really about belief and it's about trust. And you think about your bucket being empty. There's a lot of people in this world because of failures or just poor habits. You'll look at them and you'd say, well, I never follow that person. Their bucket is empty.
That's good. And Tyler and Jake, I know that you guys have probably heard credibility bucket, at least from our one-on-one meetings with Pastor Jake. He's a big credibility bucket guy. Fill the bucket up. What do you guys think when you hear the word credibility? What comes to your mind?
Yeah, when I think of credibility, really, really simply put, I just think of influence. Like, why should the people around me trust what I'm telling them to do? Why should they actually listen to what I'm telling them to do?
That's good, man.
Yeah, so for credibility, it totally starts with trust. And then once they trust you, then they're going to believe in the mission that you're setting forth for them as you're leading them in whatever the project may be coming about.
That's good.
That's good. Okay, so all of you are leaders in some way and rely on credibility to get your job done. And so, Jake, Pastor Jake, I'm going to have to find a nickname, Jay Moore. Can we go with that? Okay. So you are seasoned. Obviously, I don't know if you mentioned it's in this podcast, but you have a degree in leadership, right?
Right.
Now, how do you go about teaching someone? Is there a difference between a new leader versus an older leader for yourself when it comes to gaining credibility or filling your bucket? Do you already come in with some water in your bucket, so to speak, because of the fact that you have those education or you have that past experience?
Yeah, so I'm naturally an optimist, and so actually I think people usually have somewhat of their bucket full no matter what. I mean, because I think we want to believe in the best in people. So whether I know them or not, I look at them and say, okay, they got some level of trust. I got some level of trust, especially if they have some type of credentials, and that's not everything by no means. And so we don't want to say just because somebody has a degree in leadership means they're a leadership guru or actually know what they're talking about, because it's not always the case, right? But when we look at people in general, I think that when you're in a leadership position, someone did trust that person enough to put them in that position. So therefore, we can come into that situation and look at them and say, okay, they do have some level of their bucket full. For me, particularly, whenever I talk to somebody that has a little bit more seasoned in leadership or just in ministry in general, you have to make sure you're on your A game, because you don't want to go in there, because those are the guys that will look at you and be like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then people that are new, I think is equally the same. So you've got to be willing to put it all an equal playing field so that you can be able to have just general conversations and help people move forward in their mission, whatever God's calling them to do.
Good. So you, Jake, Lehrke, and Tyler, you both are at least maybe not new in leadership, but newer in your particular positions. Mm-hmm. You both are been at your current positions at Ignite less than a year. Right. Okay. When it comes to those 3 C's, so competency, character, consistency, is there one that you feel like is harder as a new leader that you have to really work towards to try to fill, or is there one that comes easier to you more naturally? And how do you work on the one that maybe you're weaker at?
Yeah, I love that question. I'll just say out of the 3 C's, I think that competency is the easiest one. I will also say that for a new leader coming in, they should have competency, or else they probably shouldn't have gotten the job that they're in. But I think that competency really holds the least amount of weight in the credibility bucket, because there's a lot of people who they have all the knowledge in the world, but they don't care about the people around them. They don't really want to invest in the people around them, and people see right through that immediately. And so it takes a lot longer to develop some of those other C's, like the consistency and the character. Like, people have to see that over time, and so that ends up being a lot harder to build.
So competency may be easier to feel earlier on.
Yeah.
Consistency implies that there's been a period of time that passed.
Exactly.
Tyler?
Yeah, so for me, it's a little bit different than Jake Lehrke. I have been in ministry for quite a while, and in different roles of ministry: music ministry, kids ministry, senior pastor ministry, now connections pastor. So for me, the one that is harder for me is probably the competency part. I feel like character and consistency has gotten me to who I am, that I stay true to myself, and no matter what area of leadership that I am placed in. But the competency can come very easily once you get in. Stay very teachable, and that's a great credibility to have, is you're very teachable in whatever leadership position you're in. You can listen to your peers, such as like Jake Moore, or to our pastor Jason Lineberger. So for me, character and consistency, I feel like, has gotten me to the point that I am in my life today.
Yeah, that's good, man.
That's good. Okay, so I think when people listen to this, they think, okay, credibility bucket, you can fill it up, you can pour it out. You say you could have a hole in your bucket. I heard you talk about that. Does it make a difference? Does this principle only apply to you as a leader? Can you use it with family, friends? Does it have that level of carryover? Can people listening to this who maybe don't feel that they're in a professional leadership role still have a credibility bucket?
100%. 100%. I'll say, even just for our volunteers, one thing we push into our volunteers is we got some wild middle schoolers. We got some wild high schoolers, right? And we see the easy thing for leaders to do is to yell at them and get on them about that. And when they do that, they pull out of their credibility bucket naturally. And there's going to be times where that's necessary. But if you're not building that relational equity that you talked about at the beginning, like if you don't have that relationship and the students don't understand that you care about them, if all you ever do is yell at them, then they're not going to listen. They're not going to listen at all. There's a reason where when certain leaders raise their voice, it's dead silent. And when other leaders raise their voice, no one listens. And so I think it's applicable in every aspect of life.
Yeah. I would definitely say, take marriage for an example. My wife and I this year has been married for 15 years. We dated for 6, so 21 years together. And I know that the one thing that can drain my bucket the fastest with her is consistency. Is whenever I'm not consistent in my patterns of behaviors or prayers or whatever it is. And you can even in your marriage, you can realize that like there's an empty bucket. So whenever I need, moving my family forward with a big decision, or hey, we're really, obviously we're seeking the Lord and we're in prayer. But as a guy in a marriage, go home and be inconsistent with your behaviors and see how far that gets you. And so I've been there, done that. So I think it's
on the couch.
Yeah, you're on the couch. I think, and you just got to take that as a parent. If you're consistent and you're competent, and competency isn't just like this general knowledge of parenting in general, but it's like, hey, you're speaking with confidence and you're leading well, and you take that and the consistency, but the high level of character. You fail in that area. Even your kids see that, your wife sees that, your family sees that, and so it's applicable even in the places that we would probably not think it is. It doesn't just apply for church or ministry or as a business. It applies everywhere.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I feel like your credibility bucket covers your whole life from the moment you're awake to the moment you go to sleep in day. Because imagine if I'm this great leader here tonight, but my character is great here when you're inside these walls here, but when I go home and I'm the most horrible husband, well, my credibility with a lot of people, if they see the way I act towards my wife, is going to completely change the way they feel about me. So my credibility bucket is going to be swishing and swashing all around, if you were to say. So your credibility bucket carries you throughout all of life, not just in a leadership role, family, marriage, anything.
That's good.
It's great. I like to think when I go home, my credibility bucket's just overflowing, so the people underneath me catch some.
There you go.
Okay, so we've talked about, how we fill our credibility buckets, right? Mm-hmm. So what about you are in a position of leadership where you guys are building teams. Mm-hmm. What do you do to evaluate someone else's credibility bucket, especially if you have a limited amount of time? Are the things that you can notice, maybe these C's in people, that it's like, hey, these aren't the best fit for my team because they're missing this? Maybe is there ways you can tell someone's bucket is leaking?
That's good. Somebody can jump on that
That's a
one?
really good question.
Yeah.
That's all you.
Yeah. One of the ways that you do it, you got to spend time with people. Mm-hmm. And so when you're building teams, you're developing people, equipping people, you got to spend time with them. And so the more time that you spend with them, the more time you can evaluate those C's. It's not a checklist or, something that you're trying to do like some staff evaluation or something, but you're very aware of those things. I think that the 3 C's, it's very clear when they are not being met. And so the opposite of the character, consistency, and competency is just that, a lack of character, inconsistency, or incompetency. And so when people are incompetent, it's not a surprise. You can see that. Right. When people are inconsistent, you're very aware of that. Consistency is one of those things that is like right in front of your face a lot of times. But those people that have a lack of character, it's like, everybody in the world knows that, Yeah. And so it doesn't take some rocket science to kind of figure that out. But how you do that is you see people, you spend time with people, you just have honest conversations with people, and then you kind of know where their bucket is. You kind of know, can you raise this person up to be a leader? And I've used the terminology of adding value. It's kind of like if that bucket is full, you turn the valve, and then the next thing you know, you're able to have a free flowing ability to lead people. When you don't have that bucket full, you can't add value to anybody. You see that within your teams. Nobody's adding value to anybody. Their bucket is empty. Why? Because one of those 3 C's are lacking.
Yeah. When I'm looking to build one of my leadership teams or any leader here, I'm always looking for character and consistency. You can always gain knowledge in something, so you can become more competent in an area. The more you do it, it's through training and through building relationships. So when I'm looking for a great leader, I want to make sure they have a great character, because if they have a great character, then that's going to translate over to the way that they lead. Mm-hmm. If they have great consistency, then they're going to be consistent in whatever activity we put in front of them. So I look for a leader that has character and consistency, and that's the type of person I go after, which kind of revolves around kind of who I would say that I am as a person as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think, like you said, spending time with people, like it has to happen through spending time with them, and then also spending time with the people that they are over, that they are leading. Because I think that if you have any questions about, a C that they may be lacking, the people under them are going to be able to identify that very, very quick.
Yeah. Tyler made an interesting point where he feels like if there's any area where you can leak a little is competency, maybe you can do more as a leader to fill that up. Is there a priority in any of those C's in you guys' specific ministry? Is there one that can leak a little bit, or is it like all these need to be there in order to be an effective leader or to have that effective leadership?
I think it's different. I mean, I think that all three of them are important if you're going to lead at a high level, period. But I think that in each of these areas, one of those may rise to the top a little bit. And so particularly for me, in a managerial type of leadership role, operational, consistency is very important to me. Now, obviously, character, those are things that are godly, in nature. But when people are inconsistent, it's going to be really, really hard for them to lead large groups of people or lead people from a distance or equip and train up and develop lots of teams. And so consistency rises to the top in my type of ministry, whereas in teaching the biblical principles, character is very, very high on that scale.
I think we even talked about, in the pastoral world, if your character's gone, you can't even have the other two, right? Because, we see that happen. But it's like in a secular world, you were talking about you can be a good manager and possibly have poor character because you have such great consistency and competency. You're just managing people, but are you really leading them? You cannot have maybe that.
Yeah, so, I mean, the key factor for us is that we have a mission that's centered on God, whereas a lot of secular businesses, their missions are centered around profits or returns on investments or whatever that might look like. So they're not maybe as keenly aware of the character. However, in pastoral ministry, and talking about biblical principles, it's like, obviously, if we don't have a high level of character and we're not driven towards godliness, then it's going to be hard to lead anybody in any way, shape, or form.
For sure. Absolutely.
And so when you're talking about youth, right? So you're in a specific area where you are leading middle school, high school students, and I'm asking this to Jake Lehrke now. How is that different in your setting, dealing with the credibility bucket, or even teaching that to our youth, who don't really care about that kind of stuff mostly in that setting?
Yeah, I think out of that age group, the most important one is character. And recently I read a statistic that blew me away. They interviewed a bunch of students throughout high school and then tracked them throughout college, in interviewing them like 5 to 10 years after they left youth group. They asked them, what do they remember about their youth group? And it wasn't the games they played. It wasn't the messages. It wasn't anything that their leaders said to them, but it was their leader's character.
Wow.
Like they still remember, wow, that man really lived out what it was like to be a godly man, or that woman lived out her faith so well. And I remember their character through everything else.
Yeah, that's good.
I hear a lot of stories, that's funny you say that, of someone saying how either their pastor had high character or the opposite, where it's like, I saw this guy pretend like he loved Jesus, and I saw what he was doing in his free time, and like, to your credit, when they saw that he didn't live it out, nothing else he said mattered. Like, there was no way you could preach. It's always, you don't ask a guy, the 500-pound guy, what his gym routine is, right? All right. So I appreciate all you guys talking about this. You get a unique thing. I want to go around the table one last time. I'm going to ask this to each of you. What do you think someone who's listening to this podcast can take away from this and practically use in their life, no matter what they are? What can they do to start building this credibility bucket up and thinking with this principle in mind? We're going to start with you, Jake Lehrke, and just go around.
Yeah. I kind of touched on it earlier. I think that in younger leaders, things that I see, people on our leadership team, is people overvalue knowledge. People overvalue competency. They think just because I know more than the next guy, that people are going to listen to me and people are going to want to follow me. And that's really not true when we're talking about the credibility bucket. Like, people really have to see that you're living it out yourself and that you genuinely care about them, that you have their best interests in mind before you develop that influence. And so I would just say, don't focus too much on one of the C's. Make sure that it's well-rounded, because really, and we kind of talked about it, like if you're missing one of the C's, if you're missing the character, then you shoot yourself in the foot, and the other C's really don't have any value.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good, man. So I would say, excuse me, all leadership starts with self-awareness. And so the truth of it is that people naturally would think that, all bucket is full with people. But the honest truth is that is probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And so self-awareness, take an evaluation. So I'd say anybody listening to this, what do you do from here? Evaluate those things in your life. How consistent are you in your leadership, in your just the things that are important to you, whatever those things are important to you? Do you do them consistently? Can people count on you? In your character, like, are you a person of integrity? Just evaluate those things. You can do that. And then obviously competency. Be honest with yourself and do you really know these things or do you feel like you know these things? And just really start having some good conversations. Evaluate those things in your life, and wherever you're weakest at, have some good accountability with somebody else who can speak
That's
into
good.
you and invest in you and help you walk through these things. Yeah.
Maybe you can't always be honest with yourself, but if you find someone who can,
Yep.
you're that for me.
Yep, that's it. There you go.
Yeah, for me, if I had to kind of put them in order of the C's, it would be probably character, consistency, then competency. I feel like your character, and it comes maybe from being a pastor, but I feel like your character represents basically who you are, top to bottom. That if your character is gone, then you might as well just go hang out, be nothing. Whatever. Be careful. But as long as your character is there, and that's one that I think it's going to carry you for. And just coming on staff here within the last 4 months, I feel like my character and being consistent in the way that I've presented myself has gave me a lot of credibility with the volunteers that I have working underneath me. I feel like coming in, the competency was this was a new position for Ignite here, a new position for me, and it's kind of been a learning curve together. So when it comes to being competent, I would always encourage whoever's listening to always stay teachable. Always listen to people that are above you in leadership above you, that you can always feel that once you kind of get into the job setting, but your character and consistency is what's going to help you get the job and help carry you farther, I think, in life.
Excellent. You guys had some great advice. All right. That's all we have for today, everyone. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review or share it with a friend on social media. Also, if you have topics or questions you would like to hear us talk about, you can submit those at podcast@ignitechurch.com, or you can comment if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube. We hope you guys have a great week, and thanks again for tuning in. Until next time.